All right, welcome into the Five on the Floor. Floor's yours. Before floor pregame show. Ethan Skolnick. I've got Alfredo Arteaga. I've got Nikias Duncan. I've got Brady Hawk. I'm going to have Alex Toledo. We might have Greg Sylvander here coming on too. Thanks everybody for joining us. The Heat play the Raptors at 1:30. The big news today, Jimmy Butler is playing. Eric Spoelstra spoke to the media, said everybody is available for the Heat today. Toronto has a healthy roster also. We did a lot of this stuff on our podcast coming into today about some of the matchups. So thanks to everybody for joining us. We'll try to take your comments as we go forward. I am in Orlando, by the way, but I am not at the arena. You have to get the test and then wait a day. So I should be there for tomorrow and the Celtics game. Nikai, it's going to start with you. Give me a couple of keys for today's game, maybe that some people are not talking about.
I think the big thing is going to be keeping Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet out of the paint. The Raptors have been an average half-court offense this year. Marc Gasol missing a lot of time has obviously played a part in that. Not having Kawhi Leonard as a fail-safe has contributed to that fact. But Miami has struggled to defend at the point of attack all year long. And Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet are two of the best guards in the league at getting into the paint and then spraying it out if they don't have it. And they're both good finishers as well. So I do think it's going to be imperative that Miami can try to contain those guys off the bounce. If you can shut down those drives, I think it's going to limit Toronto's half-court offense, and then Miami will be able to run a little bit.
And the second?
Second thing, just watching the Bam versus Pascal Siakam matchup. We saw earlier this year, Bam has the physical profile to guard a lot of different players, but he particularly bothers Siakam. Siakam, one of the best drivers in the league, but does have kind of a herky-jerky style. Bam can stonewall a little bit, and he also has the lateral movement to be able to stick with him on the perimeter. So I think limiting him is also going to play into that half-court game. It's going to be Bam's going to he's going to play a big role in this game. Being able to limit Siakam kind of as the head of the snake, I think will go a long way to getting Miami an advantage.
Brady, when we talk, as we're joined by Greg now, Brady, as we talk about the Bam matchup with Siakam, obviously the starting lineup change, which we got into a lot on Five on the Floor, it does not feel temporary to me. It feels fairly permanent. I don't think Eric would have rolled it out in Game 1 just to play around. I think this is a way to get all their wings in the rotation, make sure DJJ plays a little bit off the bench. But if Gasol is doing some damage, and again, Toronto has the potential to go a little bit bigger also, do you think maybe that Miami tries to go bigger at some point in this game, or again, try to deal with the small guards and play a bunch of wings?
I think that I don't know what the starting lineup's going to be yet, but I think Myers starting probably would be the best thing going against Gasol, so then you could put Bam on Siakam. And Toronto has a bunch of bigs off the bench, which is not what Miami has. Miami has a bunch of guards and wings off the bench. You got Ibaka, they got Chris Boucher, they got a bunch of bigs off the bench, so it's going to be interesting to see what they roll with. If we're going to see maybe a Olynyk a little bit sooner, not that he can contain Ibaka or anything like that, but I think that it's going to be key to stop those bigs, as that's like their strength off the bench.
And as Rancher24 tells us, starting lineup has been released. It is the same. Jay Crowder starting at the 4. Next to Bam. I don't think that this is just, Eric playing around. I mean, he had 4 months to think about this. They saw Myers get healthy. He still decided to go with Jay Crowder as the starter. And again, told me yesterday on the call, I want him shooting more. I want him shooting from deeper. He wants him to extend his range out to 25 feet. They've given Jay Crowder the green light.
This is it. This is the lineup. I don't think we should overthink it anymore. There's a part of me initially that thought that the tinkering was taking place and they were continuing to kind of figure out the exact lineup that they wanted to get to. But I think that we're moving closer and closer to a space where Spo is comfortable with Crowder kind of being that guy who has a green light, shoot it as much as possible. It allows him to size down, switch everything. So I just feel like it's probably something we should start to accept versus expect that he's going to go in a different direction.
Alfredo, if that's the case, when you look at their situation going forward, Jay Crowder's a free agent. It seems to me like they're signaling something here that he's going to be a longer-term part of the future. We haven't had you weigh in on this. I know you handle a lot of Dolphins stuff, but I know you had some thoughts of this. If we look back now at the Winslow trade, if they've made Jay Crowder a starter, then maybe the value of the trade looks a little bit better than we were thinking about before.
Yeah, except that we know what Jay Crowder is and will be going forward, and I'm going to say this: we still don't know what Justice Winslow will end up being. But 2020 is a hell of a year because I woke up this morning deathly afraid of what Kyle Lowry was going to do to our defense, and I looked up his last 2 games against us. One in January where I believe Jimmy Butler and DJJ mostly guarded him up top. And he shot 4 for 16 and 2 for 12 from 3. And in December, he shot 2 of 18 and 0 for 11, but he was mostly guarded by Justice Winslow. And after watching these stats, he's had 2 of his 3 worst games of the season against Miami. I wanted to ask Nikias, maybe he dug into it a little bit more. Was this as simple as they just let him shoot threes and he just missed them? Or were they doing anything special?
I don't think it was anything special. The length bothered him a little bit, but he still missed a lot of shots that he normally takes. He loves those pull-up threes in transition of the break. He's been one of the best shooters in the NBA over the last 2 or 3 years at that specific shot. He just didn't have it. One of the matchups that you're referencing is a game that Miami played almost exclusively zone, and the Raptors, I want to say, shot something like 12 or 13% from 3 in that game. And it wasn't a game that Miami won going away either, even with Toronto's shooting woes. So I do think there's probably some regression at play there that I would watch out for. Stylistically, I don't think Lowry was particularly taken out of the game. I feel like it was more of an issue of him missing shots.
But again, when we talk about the types of guards that give let's look at a list, guys. If we were to say 3 guards in the league that are in the bubble right now that the Heat might see, who would give them the most problems? Just top of head, just in terms of their play style. Who would be those guys?
I would say James Harden for sure because he gives everybody trouble. But on the same team, Russell Westbrook would be a disaster for this Heat team, I believe.
I mean, just East exclusively, Kemba Walker comes to mind. I think Eric Bledsoe, there's elements of his game that could be difficult for Miami. Van Vliet is, I think that he deserves a mention. But I'm kind of steering more towards the Eastern Conference. But that's probably the guys from a stylistic perspective that would project to give them the most trouble, you think, right?
We talk a lot about Philadelphia. I don't think that player's there, right? I don't know necessarily that player's on Indy. I mean, the 2 most likely teams they're going to see in the first round, Philly and Indy, I don't feel can really exploit this problem as much as some of the others can, right? I mean, are we afraid of Shake Milton at this point?
I think Brogdon could be a little scary defensively. You know, Brogdon's had a pretty good year, and he's been pretty good this year. That I think that he might give some trouble to guys like Nunn or anything that he goes up against.
And that's another topic here that I want to get into as we talk about Indiana. So the Pacers winning the other night kind of screws things up a little bit in terms of what we were talking about, because I think we all expected, or most of us on 5 on the floor, that Indiana was going to fall down to that 6th spot, and that the Heat were going to have this kind of say in the process, that if they beat Indiana twice, they get the win against Phoenix, they win, say, one of the 3 between Milwaukee, Boston, and Toronto, which is what I think they need to get, okay? That they essentially could put themselves in position to get that 3 seed and face them 3-6. But now, I don't know. I mean, Indiana may actually pass Philadelphia, right? I mean, does Spo play for an opponent here? Does it matter for a first-round opponent?
I mean, that doesn't sound like Spo to me. I don't think Spoelstra's has he ever played toward an opponent? I mean, obviously, I don't know that he would verbalize that, but right. I would just think that you just want the guys to be firing on all cylinders, and you want to really keep everyone healthy. And you don't really think about matchup dependent stuff as much at this stage.
Does it matter?
I don't think it matters. I don't think, like he said, I don't think Spoelstra would ever deal with that and do that in that situation. I said before, I don't think Jimmy Butler would ever go and do that to Indiana in that situation and back down from that matchup. So, and Miami's done pretty good against Philly this year. That I don't think they should be that much more worried about Indiana than Philly. That they've contained them pretty well this year.
Yeah, I mean, they are 5-1. They are 5-1 against the 2 teams. Before we get back into Toronto, Spo is not playing for his job, Jack. Stop it. Stop it. Spo did get apparently a vote from the coaches for Coach of the Year. I'm still not sure how Bud ended up in a tie there with Billy Donovan for Coach of the Year. But before we get back to Toronto, I want to talk a little bit about last night because we've talked about the Bucks a lot and whether or not you want to avoid them, not avoid them. I'll go to you first on this, Nekias. Did you see anything last night from Milwaukee that makes you think they're any different than they were during the regular season when they were a juggernaut?
Not particularly. The big thing that stands out from that game was just the sheer volume of threes that the Rockets got up. I mean, that's them, but also just how many corner threes. I want to say Houston took 26 corner threes last night. So I would say that. So, like in a vacuum, you're like Milwaukee is a team that has given up a lot of threes this year, particularly from the corner. They want to protect the paint, and so that kind of leans into what Miami wants to do. But then the counter to that is that Miami doesn't have a guy that stresses defenses to the effect that James Harden does, or to the effect that Russell Westbrook does. Russell Westbrook would probably be the closest comp to Jimmy Butler, but Butler isn't as explosive as Westbrook to where he can kind of bend the defense on a whim like that. So I don't think Miami could necessarily replicate that kind of volume to really break Milwaukee's drop defense like that. From Milwaukee's perspective, I think the one thing you have to watch for is their late game offense. They went to a lot of Brook Lopez down low, tried to abuse those switches, and it worked. And then they went away from it a little bit. We didn't see much of the Chris Middleton-Giannis pick and roll late in that game last night, which was odd to me because they had success with it earlier in the game. I think that's really going to be their postseason trump card, especially when things slow down. Every team that the Bucks will face in the playoffs are going to try to at least attempt to build a wall like we saw in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They're going to have three guys at the nail. They're going to try to swipe at Giannis, and then they're going to have a backline guy ready to meet him at the rim, or at least do the best that they can. So I do think.
Well, Nekias, can the Heat? I mean, with that defense you're describing, can the Heat play that defense with their personnel?
I think in theory they can. I believe that's why we're seeing a little bit more of Bam at the 5 now. Having kind of your front court being Jimmy, Jay, and Bam, those are all versatile guys. They all have quick hands. As much as Kendrick Nunn has kind of struggled as a point of attack defender, he is pretty good at flashing his hands, kind of digging down off ball as well. So he's a guy that can do that. Duncan Robinson can absorb blows at the very least if he's kind of helping down from the perimeter. So I think Miami can kind of replicate that. It's going to be more, can they counterpunch on the other end? Can they get out in transition? Can they knock down enough pull-up shots against Milwaukee's drop to really make them pay?
I want to get to a couple of the comments here as we're moving along, and thanks everybody for joining us. We just got one in. Has KO kind of taken close to taking Leonard's spot? I think he has.
Yes.
I think the way that the rotation is set up now, you can't really have Myers anchoring that second unit. It doesn't really work. You need Olynyk's ability to play make with that group. So I think it's already happened. I think Myers has become a situational 11th man that I think maybe we thought DJJ might be when we thought that they were going to go bigger. To me, that's the decision that was made. I think it's DJJ versus Myers Leonard. I think we can talk about Jay Crowder was going to play heavy minutes anyway, based on what it was. I think the decision that Eric made was I would rather have DJJ's versatility, the ability to switch everything, than I would have sort of Myers anchoring the back line for now. I don't think it's permanent. But I think it's for now. Kelly Olynyk talked yesterday, and I asked him about whether he just feels healthy now. I think that's a big part of what we've seen from him. He's not a guy who likes to talk about injuries, but the 2 times Tropical Blanket joining us for some reason not on the show. He's actually this doesn't count as you participating. There we go. You can read his comment. I just think, to me, Kelly, I think it's 2 things with Kelly. I mean, one is I think he's gotten totally healthy. And second, I just think they're putting the ball in his hands more. I mean, is there evidence to that more of the dribble handoff stuff is starting with him now than was during the season?
That's a Nekias question.
Oh man, I can pull that up when someone else speaks. I can kind of get that answer for you. From the eye test, at least, kind of depart from Alf, it does look like they're giving him a little bit more reps, and I think that plays a big part into why Miami feels more comfortable with Kelly than they do with Myers, because I do think Miami. I think entering the year, even if you were optimistic about Miami, what your concern was that having a secondary creator outside of Jimmy, especially since he isn't a shooter. I mentioned having a pull-up threat against like Milwaukee's drop. Kendrick Nunn's a guy that can do that. Tyler Hero can do that, even though he struggled so far. But they don't have a bona fide number 2 to really create off the bounce. Mm-hmm. And I think Kelly is a unique talent in that he's not an off-the-dribble threat in a traditional way. They use him in those dribble handoffs because he's already pulling bigs out of the paint because he's a floor stretcher. So that just opens up another layer of defense. So I think him getting more comfortable and getting more reps has made him more dangerous. He's more willing to fire off of pick and pops than Myers Leonard is. And then he also gives you an element of ball handling that Myers Leonard just does not, or at least he doesn't do consistently. So I think that's why you've seen Kelly get more responsibility. He's earned it.
Another thing to add, I think that a big thing for Olynyk over Myers would be just like the fitting factor. I just see, like, obviously we've seen that he fits in well with Crowder from playing with Boston. Another interesting one is he plays well with Dragic. He plays pretty well with him. So I think that just all the fitting things over with that bench unit might be interesting.
I wasn't laughing at Brady. I was laughing at that comment. I'm going to let that one go.
Let me ask you guys a question. One of my concerns going into this bubble stretch into the playoffs, and it's Spo related, and I'm a big fan of Eric Spoelstra, is his quote unquote pet players. And I was afraid that he was going to start playing Iguodala 30 minutes a night, and he was going to be as bad as he was when we went away. Mm-hmm. But he only played him 15 minutes in the opening game. Is that a thing, or that was just matchup related? And we're going to see more going forward.
I think it's a thing, but I think that we can tie in a question we just got, because I've been saying that I thought Andre would be part of the closing lineup. I still think he's going to be part of the closing lineup in a lot of tight games, but I don't know that it's for sure, right? Like I do feel and Jay said something yesterday that I forgot to tweet out because everybody was so hyped up on the Jimmy thing. He was asked about starting, and he said he'd rather close than start. I've always wanted to write a story about this, talking to a bunch of NBA players, because I feel like 90% of NBA players would say the same thing. It's not as much about getting your name announced, especially now. There's no fans cheering you when you come out, right?
Very true.
It's more so about being the guy that's trusted at the end of games. I do feel like 90% of players would say that. And Jay made it clear yesterday that he wants those reps. And to me, it's going to be an either or for the two of them, because if you've got Bam and you've got Jimmy and Duncan, and then you have Hero or Dragic, then that fifth piece is likely, except on nights where maybe Kelly has it going, somebody else has it going, that fifth piece is going to be Iguodala or Crowder. Who do we think is more likely more of the time?
I think it's Jay. I think ultimately, like, where Iguodala plays a bigger factor is if you have a series where Jimmy has to literally get 29 points per game and all he's going to do is focus on scoring, and you need other guys to start to create or maybe initiate a little bit of offense, then Iguodala kind of starts to get an elevated role that maybe he wouldn't have if Jimmy has the ball in his hands looking to facilitate. So other than that, I really feel like they're trusting Crowder. They love what he's doing. I mean, he's literally saying in the presser to you that he needs to shoot from 29 feet out. So, like, at that point, he has the ultimate green light. So I feel like Jay is probably the more likely of those two.
And we've talked about the potential regression with Jay. But let's talk about progression with Iguodala. How much, in other words, I think we all sort of take his intelligence for granted. Spoelstra talking about him being in the right place at the right time, ability to hit the corner three. But his play did tail off with Golden State last year. And then he didn't play for 8 months. And then he looked very up and down since he came to Miami. How much better can he be than what we've seen, or is this it? Is this basically what we can expect?
I feel like this is mostly going to be it for him. I feel like he looks to be in pretty good shape now. So maybe there's still a little bit room for him to get more of his legs under him, and that should help with his activity defensively. The hands have never left him. He can kind of swat a fly out of the air if he wants to with those things. But other than that, I don't see where much improvement comes from physically. The big thing with him is going to be the shooting. It's going to be the corner three. He's going to have to hit that consistently. because teams aren't going to guard him as a shooter. He's just going to have to make them pay. And if he isn't, then you kind of have to go with Jay Crowder because at least teams still treat him like a shooter despite his percentages.
I think ultimately there's going to come a point where Iguodala will end up being a very large expiring contract that can be moved in a deal. And this is next year. I don't want to jump ahead too far. I think he can absolutely contribute in this stretch. He can be valuable in a multitude of ways, but I think ultimately when we look back on it, that may end up being what they use to kind of make salaries match to try to get a boost next year before they clear the decks for 2021.
Alex, we'll introduce you here, and I'm gonna vacate soon so I can go watch this thing. We're gonna be back at halftime too. Iguodala or Crowder closes. What's your preference? Oh, I can't hear him.
How about now?
Now I hear you. Yep, I thought it was me.
I was gonna say at that point, really, it's whoever's hotter. That's all I really care about at that point because I kind of trust both of them to a similar level on defense. Maybe Iguodala a little bit more just because we see them do it at the later stages of the playoffs. But Crowder's younger. Either way, I'm good with it. Whoever's hotter.
All right, so let's go to this one, and then I'll leave. Dragic or Hero? All things equal. Okay, let's say. I mean, look, if Goran's got 23 or Hero's on one of his runs, I think you just let it flow. But I'm saying all things equal, who do you want in that situation? Because I do think there's only room for one in the closing lineup. Brady.
I think you have to go with Goran right now, even though you'd probably want to go with Tyler for the long run to get him that experience and get him all those runs in right now for that. But I think of right now with the way their team is with the leadership and the veterans and everything, you're going to try to go for this playoff run right now that you got to roll with Goran since he's been in, like you said, his EuroLeague different things. He's been in these circumstances and everything. I think you have to go with Goran right now.
Spoelstra has always talked about guys that he trusts. I mean, he talked about Dwayne and even I think he had a quote at some point where he said, "I'll never shy away from giving Dwayne the ball at the end of games." And Goran Dragic, I'm not trying to necessarily make this about a Dwayne and Goran comparison, but Goran has kind of earned that trust. So I feel like at some point that's going to play a factor. If Hero is shooting lights out and he's doing Jimmy Butler, Bucket Bros stuff, that's a different story and that's isolated incidents. Ultimately, Goran Dragic is going to be the guy that's trusted late.
Tyler Hero did play the most fourth quarter minutes on the team before he got injured.
What?
Played the most fourth quarter. Now, some of that was because he got in, he'd play sort of from the beginning of the fourth, or he would also, that the rollover from the third. But then there was also, I thought something that Eric was doing with Dragic in the regular season that I didn't like was he would put Goran in with 4 minutes left in the third and never take him out. And right, he just but I think that plays into what you're talking about, Greg. There's certain guys he just sees out there and he's like, "Oh, I'm okay. I trust him."
It's like autopilot.
And right, and then Goran would be having this deal where he would hit the wall and then have to bust through it. And there was some situations sort of right before the break where there were turnovers, very uncharacteristic Dragic turnovers that he would go through with about 7 or 8 minutes left in the game before he would start to kind of get his wind again. So I do think they're going to have to monitor to them. Alice, I know you're having some technical issues, but I'm going to go. We're going to be back at halftime. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We're going to take this up until 1:30. And again, check out the Twitter feed all day long and 5reasonsports.com. Brady will have a recap right after the game. So thanks, guys.
So what's up now? What are we doing now?
We've lost our point guard, right? We don't have our Goran Dragic all of a sudden. Who do you guys think, if you're looking at one matchup today specifically, one-on-one matchup, what jumps off the page at you, Alex?
Definitely the point guard matchup. The first thing that came up to mind there is just if they end up throwing Kendrick Nunn to guard Lowry and not, to guard somebody else, maybe a Van Vliet, that's the one that I'm most interested in. We know about Nunn's defensive woes, and Lowry is a damn good player and is somebody who will take advantage of weaker defenders. And he has a size advantage over Kendrick Nunn just because of his rear end. And no, but he does have the weight advantage, and I think that's the type of guy that Lowry could definitely take advantage of. So I think we got to watch out for that one.
Nikias, you think we're going to see a lot of Bam Siakam today, or are they going to get cross matched and miss each other?
Well, now I'm not sure, considering they're sticking with the starting lineup from the Denver game. I would assume this means Jay Crowder is going to get a lot of Siakam minutes, which makes some sense. Crowder has a strong base. I think he'll be able to kind of bother Siakam a little bit, get into his body at least. I'd worry about fouls there because Jay does get a little handsy, and Siakam's pretty nifty with the ball, especially once he gets driving. So I understand giving Jay that assignment, just kind of body him a little bit, absorb some blows, kind of save Bam a little bit, especially if the Raptors are going with Gasol. I would imagine we're going to see a lot of pick and pop with Lowry and Gasol. And Bam has the ability to play a little higher in those pick and rolls than say Myers Leonard or Kelly Olynyk would. So I expect we're probably going to see more Crowder versus Siakam. Late game, that's probably a change.
Yeah, I think that the biggest matchup I'm looking forward to is probably the Gasol and Bam matchup, just because Bam's been going against power forwards all season. He's been going against he hasn't been going against traditional bigs throughout the game like a Marc Gasol. So I'm interested to kind of see how since he's a little undersized, if Marc Gasol's going to kind of take it down low a little bit more than he usually does.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed with the way Adebayo responded to the Jokic matchup in spurts, obviously, because Jimmy had a little bit of time on him too, and there was some cross matches. But so this is an interesting run of Bam getting these really stout big center. I mean, I know Jokic lost 35 pounds, but still, you kind of think of him as one of those bigger bodied centers, and this is going to be another one of those matchups. Gasol has lost weight too, but that's an interesting new challenge that Bam didn't see all season. I think you bring up a really good point, Brady.
I'd like to see how Spo's going to use Bam in this game, because conceivably he could go 1 through 5 on Toronto. He could be used against basically anybody on Toronto. While we kind of knew what he was going to do against Denver, and we kind of know what he would have to do against other teams like Milwaukee. But I'd like to see what Spo, how he's going to use him, because I don't think we've learned too much from the first 2 games, especially since they were in December and January.
And I think this game's going to be a test of how they use their bench. Like I said before, just trying to, if he's going to counter their 6th and 7th man. Sometimes they just run 7 or 8 deep. Toronto does, and they bring in a lot of bigs. So it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to bring in Goran as the 6th man, or maybe he's going to throw in an Iguodala or an Olynyk or someone like that.
Yeah, sizing up. Nikias, give us our random scrub heat killer of the day.
Man. Well, I don't want to disrespect my call a scrub, but watch Norm Powell. He's had a fantastic season this year. It feels he's always been a good driver, but the pull-up shooting has really been there. It's probably been outlier good as a shooter this year, but he's a guy that can, if Toronto goes cold, he can give you 7 points in a 2-minute stretch and kind of break that wall for them. Would not surprise me if he gets loose a little bit in transition. Miami has to take care of the ball there. They're not going to have a crowd, but I mean, Norman Powell is a guy that kind of feeds off of those chaotic situations. So watch out for him.
Whoever Goran's guarding. No,
that's like your padded answer every time, right?
No, I don't even mean to Goran. I'm just making jokes here. But like, if Goran is like guarding Terrence Davis or somebody really athletic like that who can kind of just beat him to the rim, it's gonna get tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I think another one that could be is, like I said before, Chris Boucher. He's been interesting this year and an interesting backup big. I think that he could give the Heat trouble off the bench with his paint work. That's something that's interesting. With the Heat have struggled with perimeter defense, but it's interesting how they react to interior defense today.
A lot of people have been predicting him as a guy who would kind of jump and take a leap in the bubble. So I think that you could be onto something there. It's a name that it's not a household name at all. I think Toronto is kind of becoming famous for that, very much the way Miami has in the past as well. Do y'all think Tyler Hero can get out of the shooting slump? We need Tyler Hero threes. Like, I know the little floaters are good. We like to see him add stuff to the game, but ultimately we need some step back threes late in games. Do you think we can get any of that today?
Well, you should be able to get a lot of shots up because, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Toronto like top 5 in giving up 3-point attempts?
Yep.
So he should be able to get some shots up, and I wouldn't discourage him either, even if he's missing. We are, it's game 2 of the bubble, and I guess it's kind of important. It's kind of an important game if you want that 3 seed, but I wouldn't discourage him either. If he puts them up, put them up. Keep putting them up because we're going to need them down the road.
Last question. So tomorrow they have Boston, and I've seen a lot of harping on the timeline about the back-to-back thing. And the more that I sat with that, like they're not traveling, they're not going anywhere. They're just literally like being bussed back to a hotel, and then they come back to the same place and play. So a lot of the elements of a back-to-back that usually are laboring and kind of can bring about fatigue are not a factor. Do you guys think that the back-to-back thing is being a little bit overblown when we're looking at the schedule? Because I know Heat fans immediately get like super bent out of shape when they see any back-to-back, particularly because it's Boston and we've already played them on 2 back-to-backs. Like, is this something that we're making too big a deal about?
That's really the problem, is that it's already happened. Hasn't it happened both times already with the Heat Celtics matchup? It's like, well, like you can't get just an objective. No, but it's a good point though. I hadn't even really thought about it like that. But yeah, they're not traveling. The only thing is, I mean, it's good that the Heat are young, right? The only thing is to see how it affects Goran and Andre.
Yeah,
but other than that, I'm not really that worried about it.
But
no inconclusive tests. We need no inconclusive tests on a back-to-back.
I think the problem though with the back-to-back thing is that you're playing Toronto as a physical team that may wear you down a little bit more than a team that's easier in the season when you're playing every team. But with the bubble now, you're playing a team like Toronto. I think that may weigh into it a little bit, but I still think that's an interesting point.
Yeah, you know what's also interesting? Mark Stein had a stat this morning, and I know it doesn't matter at all because they're all playing on the same court. But home teams are somehow 14-7 in this bubble reopening.
Wow,
that's like their own spring graphics. I don't know.
I don't know what that's about. I thought originally, and I don't know if they're still going to do that for the playoffs or not, but I thought that the teams were going to be able to bring their own home courts onto the bubble and then play on them, but evidently not. They're just like in a practice practice facility or in a conference room, right?
It's bizarre because I thought the same thing. I thought that was going to be one of the main elements that they tried to implement so that there could be some sort of home court vibe going on. And it appears as if you're right. Like they're going to play on a neutral court with the logos and then it's essentially that they're practicing on the other court. But if you look at all the practice videos that the NBA has been publishing, like Bam and Duncan and Hero, they're usually on the other side, which has been the Indiana Pacers court every single practice. So that has not even become much of an advantage. So it's almost like a little bit of an optics thing more than it was really anything tangible. Not that the way that the court looks is really necessarily that tangible anyway, but well, I got 133. I think we're approaching tip off. So we could probably sign off. We'll see you guys at halftime. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully Ethan will be back to run point.
You got to
right. Next man up, like Jay said.
There it is.